Thank you very much. So thank you very much for coming in on this. Is our fourth session today, and we've got fourth session in international recruitment. And as Peter said, it's something that we've been looking at across the board, looking and providing support for providers across three of the five ICBs across London. We're covering Southwest London, Southeast London, and North Central London. But it seems that a lot of people from all around London seem to be coming into it here. Today, we're looking at the application process, the latest updates, time, costs, legislation, for example, any changes, and also the importance of making the most of the interviews as well. Because I think for me, it's a really important area to look at, because if you're going to get anyone to come into your service, you want to interview them and know what they're like. If I was going to give you someone to work in your service and they weren't fit for purpose, then it's probably the worst thing you could do. So for me, the interview process is probably the most important thing for the providers bringing people or workers into your business. And I think it's something that people just forget about very quickly. You can probably find out about someone, and that's your one moment in time. I'm seeing a lot of providers who've now, as you can see, have brought people over into their workplace, but they haven't really looked and had a full interview process. So what you find is that they don't want them to work anymore. And then you have this, all what you've gone through, it costing you as providers, as well as it's affecting those who have come into the country as well. And it leads to a lot of concerns around things such as ethical recruitment, modern day slavery. And it's something that really is something you've got to consider as providers as well. For those who are here, you know us very well, and people tell you us as we are a London Care and Support Forum, Lcas, very briefly. We obviously work along with Skills for Care, commissioners, ICBs, work with the regulator. We try and be a voice for yourselves, but as part of this, we're trying to really showcase what support and what's needed as well. So not only is it just a one-way street where we're giving you information, we're also getting feedback from yourselves. And we try and feedback the information to things like lawyers or local authorities. But remember, we're here to support you as well. So please do reach out where possible. I also love these sessions because what we've done is we've brought in various things like lawyers and other things like that in here. And these people of knowledge, you have access to them now. So please do utilize the chat function, or if you do, speak to these individuals as well afterwards. And the last session was around advertising for the right overseas talent. So advertising and making sure you're looking in the right places is important. The recording, I think Peter may share the YouTube link, which I sent him before, if you can find it at some point in the chat. So you can go over that as well. And probably on the website, probably you can access that alongside the slides as well. We haven't got long because we've got a few speakers in today, but just a reminder that with all the noise that you're hearing, still understand that things haven't changed just yet, and they're coming to effect from spring 2024. The things that have changed is just meaning more that actually you're probably going to be audited more. They're probably going to ask more questions. The way applications and things like that are taking place are now probably going to take longer, because a lot more people are doing it via the Home Office. So it could affect timing. So it's just making sure that you are still compliant with the rules and regulations, because I'm sure you'll hear from later from the speakers, getting it wrong, it can come at a great cost as well. So please bear that in mind. So for this, it means a lot of providers who are in this space are still confused, lost, unsure, unclear, and still with all what you're hearing, with all the programs and things like that, also on top of it, are really nervous as well. So the notion is to really make sure that you are doing things in an ethical format, and things are being used and done correctly, and you're able to demonstrate that as well. And as you can see from our next session, we're going to have CQC in, and they are going to be letting you know about the most important thing around getting it right. But it's not just CQC. The Home Office are one of the bodies involved, and as Peter mentioned, the HMRC now, Department of Business and Trade. There are a lot of people are looking at health and social care. It becomes, I always find it quite interesting, health and social care, when we've been asking for support and help, You'd think that they'd come, but they've come now that we've cornered the market in overseas recruitment. Now they're coming and looking at us and giving us the time of day. Unfortunately, it's not always been in the best format possible. So really make sure whether you're doing it, make sure you are on top of everything you're doing, the process you're doing, who you're going through, and who you're getting the information from. And especially when staff are coming in, make sure you audit checks and do everything accordingly and document it, because now they are doing audits, and the audit for this probably makes CQC inspection feel quite scary. So people should be aware of that. Before I leave you, next week, Thursday, I believe, the 25th of January, between 10 and 11:30, we're going to have CQC, one of the lead CQC individuals that are going to come and be sharing where we should be at when it comes to looking at overseas recruitment, things around modern day slavery. Are we getting it right? Are we getting it wrong? It's definitely important to have that, because the regulator hasn't really had much to say. So this is probably one of the first times that actually CQC are beginning to start talking about it. So please do join in next week. And that's going to be up to this one here. And as Peter mentioned, it's another 5 we're going to have, and then with live sessions as well. We're going to have things such as like the Home Office are going to be joining us. We're going to have an actual pastoral care head lead nurse for, I believe, King's College, and they're for pastoral sort of service. We're also looking at other sort of individual skills for care as well, and giving a rendition of what and how you can access other information. And I think the final one is sort of like success stories, lessons learned, which is important as we go forward. Other than that, Peter, you can add something in. If anyone wants to ask anything, we can do. I'm not sure if Toby Way is here. He's meant to be presenting from about 2:15, so I'm not sure if Toby's in here yet. I will see if that's possible. Peter, I will pass it on to you.
Okay, thanks, Dudley. I was just digging out the link for the 25th, so that I can pop that straight into the chat rather. Hang on, I've got that now. Okay, I've put a link into the event for the 25th. So if you pick up on that, that will take you through, and we will be circulating, obviously, as we do the information. It is on the website. What we've done with the website is that we've put a couple of extra pages on the website. One is specifically for a recruitment project that we're doing in Southeast London, and that's totally empty at the moment. The other one is about this international recruitment project, and everything we have on international recruitment will go onto that page. So you will be able to find it. It will stay there. And some of it is still on the older stuff is still on the news page, and it needs to be moved across, but that will take a couple of days. But everything that has been done has been recorded, all the slides, etc. So they are all available. If you've got any problems, just contact me, basically. There's a couple of other things before we move on. So I've just seen Georgia, you've just asked, we tried to register with a forum and WhatsApp group, and we're not getting any response. Can I ask when you actually signed up, please, and how you signed up?
Okay. Or if you want, Georgia, if you privately send me a DM in the chat, and I will rectify it. What I will ask for is just where you're based in, for example, geographically, whether it's North London, Southwest London, Southeast London, with your number, and I will add you in personally as well. So anyone who wants to be added into the WhatsApp group, please do. We do share as much information as possible. We know it's very busy. And there's lots happening. This is one of the various projects that we're actually leading on but also as well, we are also sharing information across the board as well. So it's hugely important. So any information you need, we will be circulating it. And on top of it, we also have, I believe, Toby has come in, seems like our resident lawyer who's coming in these days, really to give us an update on, for example, the application process, costings, and also giving us a few elements of what actually the Home Office and the government are doing in regards to the international overseas recruitment. So I will stop sharing my screen right now, and I believe Toby should be here. And Toby, the floor is yours, if you don't mind.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes. Let me just share. Sorry, I had a border emergency, put it that way. So sorry I'm late. Let me just, sorry, I'm trying to.
I mean, thanks for that, Toby. Just while you find it, it shows everyone what even a lawyer is dealing with on this day to day. So it's a busy space and busy time. So everyone can see in real time what's taking place. So it's a good time, if anything, just to understand and get a rendition of what's going
I
on.
was going to say, just to follow up on the Georgia point about not receiving things. We used blind mailings to cover a lot of people, and sometimes they go into bulk or spam. So it's useful as a bit of a regime to check your bulk or spam at least once a day. And if you're not getting things from us and you think you should be able to getting them, then just contact me, either email, WhatsApp, give me a call, and we'll endeavour to sort it out for you. Over to you, Toby.
Can you see my screen? You can. Yeah.
We can indeed. Thanks, Toby. It's all yours.
Yeah, sorry. Apologies for being late again. Well, so I'm hoping I'm talking about the application process. I mean, I will talk about the changes a little bit at the end, but essentially, you probably know as much as we do, quite frankly, at the moment. But for those that don't know, I'll talk about them. So, I mean, this slideshow is really for people who haven't applied for a license yet. I'm hoping that's what you're after. So just to sort of overview of the process. So if you're thinking of applying, you've got to be considering mandatory documents that validate the application. You've got to put together a cover letter and hierarchy chart, and I'll go through these. And then we've got non-mandatory documents that are not actually prescribed by the Home Office, but essentially, if you preempt the Home Office's questions, you're doing yourself a huge favor at the moment, because those that have a license will be aware it's really not great at the moment with timeframes once you have a license and are involved in any sort of compliance action or applying for causes. Compliance, you've got to be aware of. I'm not going to huge detail on that because it's quite a large area, but if you're thinking of applying, you've got to kind of be aware of these obligations you're taking on. So quite a lot of the clients that I have calling me, or potential clients, people who haven't, just contacted us, they don't seem to be aware of the importance of that. So I think I'll go through that form. I'll go through that a little bit, and then we've got an application form as kind of the final part of the application process. So I'll just go through those points quite swiftly. As I said to Dudley, we're extremely busy at the moment, so I can't give you loads of time. But if you can see my email there, you can drop me an email with questions, and we always get back within one working day. Okay, so whoops. So at the very beginning of when you're considering applying, you don't go to the application form. A lot of people do this. They'll find the application form and they'll fill it out. The first thing you've got to do is consider the application documents, because once you submit the online form, you have 5 working days to submit. And Dudley, if you need to chime in, and if I'm saying something irrelevant, do chime in, or Peter. You have a list called Appendix A. I've put a link in the slide, and this will probably be shared later. But typically, if you're a CQC provider and regulated business, you've got your CQC registration. That's an easy one to give. And we'll talk about the CQC thing in a moment, if you're not regulated. CQC registration. So essentially, you're providing a link to the register, or you can give your registration certificate. Bank statement is a good one. Very easy. Simply download your bank statement, and then you've got a second document. PAYE registration document. You get this when you apply for PAYE. Some people don't have it, but it's an easy one to get from the HMRC. If you're struggling for a document, they'll send that within 10 to 14 days. And a signed lease agreement would be a fourth. So as I say, there is a longer list. So those are typical 4 documents we might choose. There are other options: CT600, the notice to deliver that, or the CT600 and the acknowledgement. Accounts, if they're prepared by a chartered accountant. And there's a few more. I put the link there so you can have a look. The relevance of the mandatory documents are, if you fail to provide, they'll most likely just reject the application, so you'll waste your time. You'll get a refund, but they don't, the way the Home Office work, they won't reject your application until the caseworker sees it. And that's, typically at the sort of 5-week, 6-week mark. Okay, next thing in the application preparation life cycle, you've got to prepare a cover letter. Appendix A essentially will detail the points that you've got to go through, but what you're looking at is, hang on, let me move this window. You've got to talk about the business. You've got to give the Home Office a really good idea of what you do. Dom care provider, we were established in X year. Our typical clients are this, X and Y. Talk about, and the Home Office asks for hours. Now, in your sector, you may not have set hours, but you would talk about the hours in relation to the vacancy in most cases, because what they're probably interested in that question is making sure that the vacancy is going to pay enough, essentially. The justification for why you're applying, I mean, that's probably pretty obvious. So you've got to give them as much information as possible, but the mandatory bits are simply, okay, what's the vacancy? Describe it. Describe the salary. SOT code I haven't put there, but that's obviously important. If you're in care, typically 6145 for a care assistant or a support worker. Where are we? The vacancies. Okay, so why are we applying for the license? Do we have vacancies, and why? So is it because you've got a big new contract, so you've got more hours? Is it because people are leaving? I've got a case at the moment where a lot of the carers are of retirement age, so they're going to have to replace them. You need to justify why you're applying for the license, and that is super important now in the care sector, particularly because the Home Office are really cracking down, and they're working with the CQC as far as I could see, and sharing information. There's been a lot of issues with people bringing over carers for financial gain in terms of, being paid essentially by the migrants. And then when they're here, there's no work. So the Home Office are trying to crack down on that. And you want to preempt that in the application if you're in this sector, especially if you're small or new. Because if you're smaller or if you're newer, you're going to have less credibility to begin with than an established provider or a big provider. So is the role currently filled by a migrant? Yes. I mean, that's another alternative. You might have a student, for example, who you want to put into full-time work and sponsor, or you might have someone on a skilled worker visa who's doing 20 hours with you, who you want to move over to you. So that might be another justification. Yeah, and if we have specific people, which is preferable, because remember, we're trying to justify why we want the license to the Home Office. So if we can point to people and say, well, we really want to bring these guys into the business because they're skilled, whatever, we've got to specify them in the cover letter, and we've got to explain why and how we're recruiting them. So did they come through an agency? Was it a referral? Et cetera, et cetera. So the more evidence you can provide in terms of hard evidence, i.e. written down, relating to recruitment, the better. The idea is we're trying to build credibility with the Home Office. The more credibility we can build, the better chance they'll just approve it quickly without questions. Salary, I think you probably all know there's a minimum threshold on that. So if you were to say that you were below that on the cover letter, let's say 6145, and you were paying minimum wage, 1042, whatever it is, then and the hours were not enough to hit the 2960 per year, you'd get refused on that basis. So that's quite important. Hierarchy chart, we need a chart showing the whole business if you're below 50 people in the business. So that means names, job titles, and the vacancies have to sync with whatever we've described in the in the cover letter before. So if we've got 5 vacancies and we're saying we need 5, you've got to specify those are the vacancies you want to fill with migrants. Okay, non-mandatory documents. I've alluded to that. I mean, the Home Office are, I mean, a year ago, the advice was, we had people who were newly authorized or newly registered with CQC, and we would say, yeah, it's, put it in. They'll approve it. We'll get the mandatory documents. We'll get a cover letter. We can say, broadly speaking, we've been encouraged to apply for the license, which was the message sent out by government and local councils, and it will go through. Now, with a newly minted CQC business that's providing regulated activities, my advice is we need proof of clients. So we need to show hours, and we really need to drill down into the detail as to why you want the license, because they're not handing them out as they were before because of the issues I've mentioned. So, I mean, there's different formats depending on who you're dealing with, but you've got, I mean, you might be an approved provider, or you might have an email approval of that, and you might have an email chain with someone regarding hours, social worker. It will depend on your business, exactly what you're doing. You might have an ISO, or you might have a client contract with a private individual, but we want to provide that sort of information to really give them the detail that they want. And the idea is we don't want them to ask questions. We want them to just approve it. Once they start asking questions, it gets very slow, and it's more work essentially. Any other evidence that relates to the credibility? Yeah, again, some of you and many of you won't have this sort of thing, but some, depends what you're doing. If you're kind of focusing on, I don't know, private dom care clients, you might have brochures, etc. Or if you're a care home, you might have brochures, you might have Google reviews, but that sort of thing again helps with the credibility. As I say, these are non-mandatory, so you're not going to get rejected if you don't supply this, but it's very much strongly advised. Compliance, again, this is a big topic, but if you're going to get a license, you've got to have an idea of what's involved. There is, broadly speaking, when you get a license, you are signing on to report on the people that you've sponsored if they, for example, leave the business, and you do that through the sponsor management system. There's also a very important document that you can Google called Appendix D. You would need to keep all of the documents prescribed in there on your files. And in terms of the format of the files and how you keep them, that's not so important. Obviously, it has to be secure, but the main thing is you need to be able to demonstrate to the Home Office that you have those systems in place. Depending on the speed in which you need the license, you can have a look at compliance stuff after you submit the application, but the right to work checks, etc., you've really got to have a look at those before you submit the application, because if there's anything non-compliant in that area, then you're potentially in big trouble. So when we have clients coming to us and saying, okay, well, we need to get this in a couple of days, we can say, okay, well, we'll look at the compliance after the submission, but we've got to look at the right to work checks. And that would include, typical problems are students working too many hours for you, or it's quite common now, used to be certainly a couple of months ago, people working too many hours on skilled worker visas who are sponsored by another party. They're allowed 20 hours at the moment. So you've got to look at those sort of things. And if you're not familiar with share codes and digital right to work checks, then, that's a bad sign. So you have to have a look into that straight away if you're considering doing this. So we have prepared the application. We've got the mandatory documents. We've hopefully got non-mandatory stuff. We've got a cover letter. We've got a hierarchy chart. We'll draft up the form at that stage. Online form, very straightforward. Incorporation date, PAYE, employer reference numbers, employee numbers, etc. So straightforward. Submit it. The fees are, as you see on the screen, small and large. I've put small employer and large sponsor. It should be small sponsor and large sponsor. You'll probably know if you're large, essentially, because you will be submitting audited accounts. So you ask your accountant where you fit, but most likely you will know. There is a priority service available, which is on request. So you have to apply for that at 9 in the morning until you get it, basically. 42 days is what I put for our clients at the moment for a standard application. And then priority, they would make a decision within sort of 7 days. If you do a good application, if you're just giving the bare bones at the moment, they're likely to say, okay, we'll take your money, but and you'll receive an email within 7 to 10 days saying this is complex, and we're not going to process it quickly. So yeah, and then right, okay, this is essentially a summary from the government website regarding the changes in law, which allegedly are meant to be happening, at the beginning of this year, not in April, apparently. but we don't have good information. Is this something that you've gone over already? Or, I mean, essentially, I think you might all be familiar with this.
I think the biggest concern, I think, Toby, you've seen it on social media, news, everything at the moment, is that when the changes taking place, and I think, as you've mentioned, you're a lawyer as well. I guess there also is the fact that some of these changes are not going to take place till spring, but then some things may be taking effect now. So I guess probably the most important thing here in the application process is maybe the updates, maybe rather than going over what's actually was in place, but maybe any subtle changes or things that you're noticing as well would be really helpful as well.
Is the CQ, I mean, are all the people in the forum, the CQC change going to be an issue, or it's not really going to affect people?
I think it. Go on, Peter.
I mean, I think, Toby, the issue around CQC and change is that as far as many providers are concerned, they are unsure of what that change will entail. And the way that CQC have operated, which was restricted in that sense by COVID, etc., many providers have not had a CQC inspection for quite a long time. So there will have been a number of changes within that organization in advance of the change in inspection regime. And we've also had the changes in the fact that CQC are also now starting to overview rather than inspect local authorities. So that has affected the way that some local authorities are working and affecting the way that their quality monitoring teams also inspect care providers. So there are too many changes in the process to actually determine exactly which one's causing what reaction.
I mean, from the immigration point of view, obviously they're going to be the significant change is that 6145 carers, senior carers, will only be sponsorable if they're regulated. So
well, I think you're right, and there's been a couple of examples have come up already where some organizations have either fallen foul or borderline fallen foul because they have both CQC registered and non-registered services. And there have been issues where they've employed one in the other, if you like, or across both sectors.
I mean, the thing is, at the moment, as the law stands, so we have clients who do supported living or unregulated activities. They won't be doing, they'll be I don't know, taking people out, but they won't be doing personal care, and they're legally entitled to provide those services. And at the moment, as the law stands, they don't need to be CQC regulated to be sponsored. Okay, but whenever this change comes in, they will be. If I was doing a sponsor license and I had a business that had both regulated and non-regulated services, then we'd just make that clear. We'd say, well, we're not going to sponsor people in the unregulated bit, which would be acceptable. But yeah,
I mean, what we found, and this is where it starts to get tricky. Registration is one thing.
Yeah.
Inspection is something different. And the views of, say, a local authority who may be thinking they act as an intermediary between the client, the provider, and CQC. Whilst registration with CQC is done, that's point A. Getting CQC to inspect, we've had examples where, say, a provider with 10 clients has been declined because they don't have enough clients to warrant a CQC inspection, whereas somebody else, maybe down the road, has only had 3 clients and they have been inspected. So it's not an even playing field. And with part of the new CQC inspection regime or program, they're taking much more account of what really could be overall termed as organizational culture. so including the well-being of staff, and the well-being of migrant workers or international recruits has been a particular point of focus.
I mean, I think it's important. I think we, Toby, I think there are a few slides left, and I think there was, you know, the application process, the time frames it takes, you've mentioned, the slight changes coming up. I think you also mentioned another area now, as a lawyer, of what changes you've seen that are taking place now with suspensions and ongoing things there. So we've got a few minutes.
Suspension, yeah, I mean, suspensions are, I've got a few examples where sponsors have just received a suspension letter out of the blue with incorrect information on it. And you know, apparently they have intelligence from the Home Office, have intelligence from either CQC or HMRC relating to, you know, either normally it's something to do with non-payment of migrant salaries or that sort of thing. But I've got at least one case where the information on the suspension letter is incorrect. A lot of the suspension letters are justified, I mean, in terms of, but they're much more aggressive than they used to be. So what would happen previously, you'd normally be audited or you'd have a digital compliance check, and that is the Home Office checking all those compliance issues that I referred to earlier in detail, and then they'd suspend your license. Now we're getting letters just sent out willy-nilly, it seems. Some of them, I mean, as I say, the majority have some justification, but some of them are, you know, they're not supported by good information. So when you receive a suspension letter, it's you know, it really is crunch time from the Home Office, because you've got a 20 working day period to reply, and the threshold for proving that you're meeting the requirements in terms of evidence is high, and it's also unreasonable because it's very difficult to prove that you're carrying out. I mean, I've got clients who are, you know, they might be working, so they might have a service contract with a third party. They, you know, and they don't have the relevant records in their own business for whatever reason to prove that they're carrying out regulated activities to the extent that the Home Office wants to see. So so that's probably the biggest thing. And I think what I would say to people who are thinking about applying, you've really got to know your compliance, and you've got to know, okay, how are we going to record this? So, because the Home Office, for example, you know, if you've got Care Planner or if you've got another piece of software, that those notes need to reflect, they need to be very good and reflect the regulated activities you're carrying out. And, you know, some providers are maybe not doing that to the right level. And I'm no expert on the CQC. You Peter certainly is by the sound of it, and Dudley, I assume, is pretty good on that. But I'm not sure what the standards are in the CQC. But at the Home Office, the way they expect to see evidence is, you know, borderline unreasonable. So you've got to take that super seriously. If you receive one of those letters and they are sending them out of the blue, then it is, you know, then it's crunch time. And if you don't have evidence to show the Home Office, they will revoke that license. And as I say, in some cases that's unreasonable, but you've then got to take them to court. And all of this time, those migrants, you know, they're going to receive a curtailment letter at some point, because a court case will take months, even years, be incredibly expensive. So the compliance thing now, we're really stressing how important it is.
I think what we're also seeing is there is a bit more cooperation between, say, the Home Office and CQC.
Yeah.
And compliance is the area. And there seems to be various things that trigger one or the other going in to look at causing a suspension or a revocation of a Home Office license. And I think perhaps they've realised that there was some errors, you know, originally with the way that licenses were handed out. And that has caused a number of problems. If you look at the number of people who's, you know, international recruits that have been dumped on the market.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the whole thing was. I remember when they introduced this, and they literally were the government and local government were promoting, were reaching out to care providers and say apply for a license. So that, and they weren't stressing the compliance obligation. So lots of people were applying with probably, you know, and I think I remember reading somewhere, you know, this is straightforward, and on a government website. I should have taken a screenshot at the time. And I had lots of people saying, oh, it should be quite straightforward, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, 2 years down the line, of course, they're not going to meet, you know, they're going to have missed loads of, they're going to breach that license because of the way the government presented it.
Exactly. And I think it's hugely important. I think we've got CQC in next week, so they will be able to give us more of an update of where they are at, but definitely compliance, as we know in the care sector, is one of the huge things to do, and it seems like the Home Office are now taking that sort of stance as well.
Dudley, just one final point, which is it's important probably for people who have the license. There's lots of people who are applying for, you know, large numbers of COS. If you know, that's a sort of trigger. If you're a smaller business and then you're suddenly applying now for 20, 30 COS at once, you've got to make sure that you've thought about that properly before you do it, because that is a big trigger for sure. And they'll look at your, you know, they might look at your, they might just go and look at your accounts online and say, well, hang on, you're a tiny business. I've got a client like that. They're actually, you know, they've given shortened accounts at the company's house. They've got they had a revenue at the time of £1 million, so it's not a tiny business by any means, but you can't see that on the company's house. The compliance caseworker has just gone unchecked. So, well, you've got no employees. They were using contractors at the time, and we're talking about a year and a half ago, because they're old accounts, and so they're not looking at the context at all, and they've issued a suspension letter on that basis. Whereas the reality is they have huge contracts. They had contractors before, and they've now exchanged those for migrant workers. So it's all perfectly reasonable. But the Home Office, they didn't send an email saying, "Oh, could you explain?" They've suspended the license. So if we can't evidence all of that, and evidencing it is an absolute nightmare, because it's not just evidencing contracts, it's evidencing the work, etc., etc. You know, it's a huge job. And so that was it really. So I could talk for ages.
No, that's fine, and it's quite interesting you've ended like that, because one of the things is, before we go into Sonia Rai, the next speaker, it's CQC's lovely phrase: if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So I think that is something that I think most people in the case that if they haven't got that memo now, please, it's something they should remember when they leave this call as well. So it goes across the board, from employment, recruitment, everything. And I think it's important. And thanks for that, Toby. And by all means, Toby's information is there. If you do want to send any questions, personally, we'll try and get them out to Toby. He listen, Toby, I'm sure you'll let everyone know it's a busy time. There's lots of people now who have probably knee-jerk or panic of what the government have said, and trying to move forward. So please do get in touch with Toby, and he will give you.
I'm just seeing if there are any questions in the chat, but if you do have questions, basically we have some changes that are going to affect a lot of people not in your sector. IHS is going up, and also the salary threshold is going up in April, so we're super busy. But if you email questions to me, either I or someone in my team will reply within a working day. So please do, and excuse the fact I have to go sort of
Okay,
quite
no.
sharpish.
No, that's
Okay.
fine. Thank you very much, and thanks for all of that. I think it's always good to get the legal stance, because I think if anything, you don't want you make compliance is hugely important. Interestingly enough, and it's really, if we go into our next speaker, I think getting it right is important, but obviously staff, the human beings, and also making sure that you hire the right people. We don't want people who are coming in and out of your organization because you haven't done your job properly. So when it comes to things such as interviews, making sure you can vet the candidate, making sure they're coming from the right part of the world, and making sure you're happy with them, because no one loves an unhappy workplace. So getting it right in the first place is most important. So on that note, not to waste time, we are going to be joined. Oh, we have a question. Sorry, Sonia. I'm going to go to you in 2 seconds, but there's a question very quickly from Rhoda before I think Toby disappears.
Hi, Toby. Thank you
Hi,
so
I
much
read
for
that.
the session. It was really insightful. So quick one. We have a staff that we've sponsored from overseas, but she hasn't started working. She hasn't come in for onboarding. She hasn't replied emails. But then she got to reply later on that she's been sick for a while. She even had to travel abroad due to the sickness. And knowing the UK rules, we can't just let her go. So what would you advise is the best practice for that?
So just clarify a little bit. When was her start date? She was coming from which
Okay,
country?
so she was
Yeah.
supposed to start, she was coming from Ghana. She was
Mhm.
supposed to start, and she was already in the UK anyway. She was a student, but then switched from a student visa,
Yes.
yeah, to a care worker visa.
Yes.
But since May that she's been recruited, she's not been feeling well, and she's given evidence to back that up, although the evidence didn't start until October. But what would you say is the best practice
I
for
mean,
that?
is she on sick leave with you? So
No, she hasn't applied for leave or anything. She had not even started working. We're waiting for her to resume working. Then she sent us an email.
you I mean, you can't just you can't extend her start dates without. So what you should really do in that case is take her on, put her on sick leave, and then report it through the
Okay.
SMS.
Yeah, it's been reported through the SMS though, but would that mean we'd have to pay her for sick pay when she hasn't worked at all?
Yeah, but if you can't just put off a start date because the person's telling you she's sick. You've either got to end the sponsorship or you've got to take her on and put her on sick.
Okay, so it would be okay if we end the sponsorship
Yeah, but you've got to take
instead
employment. Yes, you've got to take an employment advice beforehand.
Okay.
But the thing is,
Okay.
you can't.
Sorry to come in here. I'm a HR consultant, so I can
Yeah.
answer your question for you later, Rhoda.
That's exactly who you need
Yes,
to
Sonia,
speak
thank
to.
you so much.
No
But
problem.
All
from
right,
the
thank you. Thank
sponsorship,
you.
but from the sponsorship point of view, you can't just put off the start date. In fact, you're meant to
Yeah.
explain if it goes beyond 28 days, you've got to have a good reason. And if someone is just telling you they're sick, then you've got to have very good evidence. Speak to Sonia about the employment.
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
we've got mail trails anyways when we sent
yes.
her email and then she's replied all of those. Yeah.
But have you?
All right.
I mean,
Thank
I
you.
think Sonia can probably follow up on the sort of things you'll need. Okay,
All right. Thank you.
brilliant.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
And I think it's a great link. Thanks, Sonia, for jumping in there.
That's
The
okay.
wonderments of putting a lawyer and HR expertise together at the same time. I could have timed it better. So without further ado, Sonia, the floor is yours about obviously the most important thing about obviously when we're talking about interviews, but also other things that come around HR as well with the overseas workforce. So I will be quiet now and let Sonia,
you.
once her slides come up,
Thank you. Give me a second. Right.
No problem.
Can you all see my screen?
We can indeed.
Perfect. Let me just make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Right. I can't see anything other than my screen right now. So please let me know or just interrupt me if you've got questions or anything like that while I'm going through. So yes, I think that was a nice little intro from that question. So my name is Sonia Rai and I'm going to be talking about international
That's what she's trying
recruitment.
to expand on.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm talking about international recruitment and interview considerations. And again, if you want to contact me, you can reach me or a member of the team on hello@nectarhr.co.uk. So first of all, who am I? Okay, my name is Sonia Rai. I'm the founder and director of Nectar HR. We are a HR consultancy service. We have clients all over the UK. I have a master's in HR. I have over 20 plus years HR experience. I love all things employment law and love all things CQC regulation when it comes to supporting our wide client base. So we have got lots of clients across lots of different industries, but mainly we support clients in health and social care, all aspects of social care. My pet hate from a work perspective is generic HR. So I don't like downloadable templates that don't really help you. I like hands-on HR support and advice for our clients. So we are not about generic HR. So today I'm conscious of time. I'm not sure how long we've got, but I'm not going to try and take too long to run through this. So you can always email in with questions. We're going to talk a little bit about interview format, how to make your candidate feel comfortable. We're going to be talking about language and cultural barriers, unconscious bias, thinking about what your candidate's going to need from you, different kinds of interview questions, scenarios and tests, and also very importantly, interview notes. So the advice that I'm going to be running through today and some of the tips and things like that I'll be giving incorporates employment law, some ACAS best practice, but also with my CQC hat on and kind of knowing what our regulator would be looking for when they're also looking at your recruitment process. Plus, we help lots of clients with their sponsorship licenses, keeping the SMS system up to date. So if you've got all of this for your recruitment and selection side of things, it just sets you up. It's a good, strong foundation, essentially. So first of all, we'll think about interview format. You know, gone are the days where we are just going to be talking to somebody who's abroad. We have lots of candidates now that are already in the UK, potentially already on some kind of visa and looking to switch. So think about, are you providing an interview face-to-face or are you going to be virtual? And, you know, just making sure, you know, with your face-to-face interview, for example, making sure that it's a welcoming and positive experience, making sure you've given that candidate all of the information to find your location, ask them if they require any reasonable adjustments on account of a disability. So that just kind of protects your business from any claims of discrimination because you didn't make a reasonable adjustment at the time. And again, you can ask that within a virtual interview, but also just making sure that they've got the link in time. Perhaps ask them to just double check that their Teams or, you know, Zoom works. I logged on to Zoom today, haven't used it in a while, and it took, you know, 5 minutes for an update. So just a little bit about that for them so that they don't quite feel so nervous when they're joining the interview. So talking about nerves, we really want to be able to get the best out of a candidate when we are interviewing. If we put somebody at ease, we're going to get more from them. That is the basic principle of interviewing. Gone are the days where you really want to put somebody on the spot and make them feel uncomfortable and nervous. We really want to make them feel comfortable, feel open, so we can really tease that information out of the candidate. So we need to understand that first of all, we recognize that they may be nervous. You know, this is potentially an unknown environment for them. It's a different country. And so let's try and set their mind at ease. Just being aware that they may be nervous is a huge thing for an interviewer. You know, let's break the ice. We don't have to kind of go into questions straight away. I always like to do a, how are you? If it's virtual, you know, can you hear and see all of the panel okay? Is your mic working? Do you have any problems? Let them know that, you know, I'm in an office and the fire alarm is going to go off in 20 minutes, but I will just make sure I mute when that happens, those kind of things. Always let them know that we'll be making notes. So we're very much listening to what they're saying, but I may well be scribbling away or typing and looking at a different area on my screen. Introduce the interview panel. So whoever is on the panel, make sure you're introducing yourselves, maybe just a little bit about you. You know, I'm Sonia Rai, I'm I've been with the organization for, just kind of puts them at ease. And also, one of the things that we regularly support our clients on is just being aware of language challenges. So making sure that you are speaking not too quickly, avoid jargon or slang. So, you know, things like LA, ICS, ICB, let's steer away from that. Let's assume that our applicant doesn't know what that stands for. And we want to be really clear and ask objective questions. So let's think about how we're communicating to ensure that they can fully understand the question, are able to take that time and answer appropriately. Let's think about cultural differences. You know, in some cultures, it's very important to value modesty and humility. In other cultures, they value self-promotion. We need to be very mindful of that. I'm going to touch on this in just a minute, in a few more slides, but we do need to be very mindful of those cultural differences. And we also need to be thinking about processes beyond the interview stage, potentially, you know, allow them time to ask questions at the end of the interview. So one of the things that I like to do at the start when I'm making them feel at ease, introducing who is on the panel, I will say to them, you know, we'll be making notes. If you have any questions, we'll go through them at the end. But perhaps we have some housekeeping questions, which we always set up for our clients. That is things like how flexible can you be with your hours? You know, we require nighttime and evening working. Is that going to be a problem for you? But also, you know, if you think that there are some frequently asked questions that you're coming across from applicants about the visa and the immigration process, why don't you just pop that in at the end before you go to their questions, so that you may well have already answered something for them. So, you know, there may well be questions cropping up about dependents and family members joining them. And I guess it's just to be able to kind of put that into context, really, and navigate some of those questions and be prepared for them. So, you know, if we're looking at some of the cultural barriers and language barriers, I think one of the biggest things is just to be patient with applicants, and recognise that they may be using a second language to communicate with you. You know, think about the times when you've been on holiday and you're trying to, you know, order your favourite meal in a restaurant and you can't quite grasp the language with locals. You know, it's very much the same kind of scenario here. So, you know, people may feel a little bit uncomfortable, they may feel nervous, they may feel not very confident about saying a certain phrase or something in English. So let's just be mindful of that. You know, your own body language, the way that you're coming across as an interviewer is extremely important at that time, because either you are going to feel like you are somebody that's welcoming them and they're able to kind of say, look, I'm just struggling with that question a bit, can I just have a minute? Or, you know, if you've got a frown on your face and your arms crossed and you're looking like, keep looking at your watch, you're not going to get the best out of the applicant, which is not what we want. And therefore, you know, we could, you know, some icebreaker questions would be great. Gives you a bit of background. You know, a typical British one is talking about the weather, isn't it? So we could ask them what the weather's like where they are. You know, there's lots of different icebreaker questions just to put them at ease, understand a little bit more about them. I wanted to touch on unconscious bias. So just so you know, we run training on unconscious bias that takes about a full in-depth 3 hours. So I've only stuck to 2 slides today. I'm extremely mindful of time, but you know, this is a huge topic and we all have unconscious bias at play. So I think the first question was, what is unconscious bias? So it's where we have an inclination or a prejudice for or against a person or a group. And sometimes that can be unfairly aimed at people, with people who are different to us or with people that we don't necessarily identify with. And I think when we're interviewing in this specific scenario, we will be coming up against our own unconscious biases, whether we recognize them or not, they will be there. You know, we are all programmed to categorize others subconsciously. You know, we make biased judgments. I think we make on average 11 different assumptions within the first 9 seconds of meeting a stranger. So from the moment that I jumped on this Zoom call, you know, subconsciously, you would have made judgments about me. And then we then reinforce that. Now, there's lots of things that make up our unconscious biases. You know, we may have a friend from a particular country who is always really friendly, always really welcoming. So we therefore associate everybody from that background or that culture as really friendly, really open, really welcoming, love cooking food, those kind of things. Or we may see something on the news that makes us think more negatively because it's something different to us, something that we don't necessarily identify with. So we have to recognize our unconscious biases, and we have to understand how they may come through when we are interviewing. Obviously, we train on all different aspects of the employment life cycle, but today we're talking about recruitment. So thinking about our own unconscious biases and perhaps how they impact us in the workplace, but also particularly when we are interviewing applicants who are going to require a visa to come and work for us. The good news is we can change our unconscious bias. I think the first step there is calling them out so they are no longer unconscious, but thinking about self-reflection, perhaps, like I said, doing some interactive training, going away and thinking about how you may challenge yourself and challenge your own unconscious biases to think about how you might do things differently. But when we are recruiting and interviewing applicants from abroad or in this country that are from a different country or with a different cultural background, we do need to be mindful of our unconscious biases. So I would say some time reflecting on that and thinking about that would definitely be time well spent for interviewers. We also need to think about what our applicants are going to need. And again, these are some questions that we might want to ask or support on in the end of our interview, or this might be something that we think about when we're making a conditional offer of employment or when they are joining our organisation. So, you know, are they going to need help with the visa process? If so, how much? What are they going to need from you? Have you got the right support in place to be able to do that? What kind of training support will they need? You know, coming over to a new country, setting up is not easy. Imagine if, you know, you or I were asked to move abroad for a job. What are the kind of things that we would be needing to think about for ourselves? And we find that welcome packs and induction packs here are really, really good. We help lots of our clients put those together in terms of this is your local area, accommodation, public transport routes, where they'll be working, nearest schools, how to register for a GP, all of these kind of things. And again, some of this may well affect their decision to move over here or to join your organisation. So, you know, openness, thinking about the questions that they may have and the support that they need, so that expectations on both sides are set and very clear is also really important. Okay, so let's move it over to interviews. A little bit about tests and assessments first. So, you know, I think it's important to recognise that when you are recruiting somebody to join your business, there are many, many ways to do it that aren't just about your typical face-to-face interview for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. There's lots of other ways, innovative ways, different ways that we can find out more about our candidate to ascertain really if they are the right fit for the role that we are recruiting for. Now, I run a whole different session on recruitment and how to be objective in recruitment and protect yourself from claims from protected characteristics under the Equality Act. So I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but I'm just going to be talking generally here, but I will always bring it back down to objective scoring. So, you know, you don't just need a set of objective questions, interview questions. You could maybe think about a role play. You could do that in face-to-face, but, you know, during COVID, we had to get extremely resourceful with how we did these things. And, you know, the platforms like Zoom and Teams that are available to us now allow us to do these kind of things very, very easily. So let's say, you know, you normally allocate 45 minutes for an interview. Let's push that back to 20 minutes for the key questions. Let's look at perhaps some other skill sets that we want to see from the applicant, and maybe we put in a 5-minute role play situation for them. Maybe we get a scenario in place. So either we ask a question or we ask them to present it. So we could give them a scenario a week beforehand and they have to perhaps put their thoughts down, or we send it to them, or they complete it when we are meeting them face to face. So maybe they are given a scenario and they're given 10 or 15 minutes to write up a response about perhaps how they may react to that situation. And then of course there's things like language tests, but you can also do mathematical tests, different kind of tests, as long as they're objective and they are all linked to the skill set and the competency level that you're looking for with this job. These should all be fine for you to use. So let's talk a little bit about the type of questions that we can ask. Open questions. So like I said at the start, we're really wanting to make our candidates feel comfortable in this environment, whether we are virtual or we are face-to-face. And we want them to feel like we want to be able to entice a lot of information out of them, because the more evidence that we have, the more we can kind of score appropriately. And open-ended questions allow us to do that. We'll move on to closed questions in a minute, but really, we want to stick to open questions that aren't leading. So we don't want to really give away information that we expect or what we kind of expect from an answer. So you need to be really mindful of how you word your questions. And, you know, we support our clients with making sure that our open-ended questions aren't discriminatory, or, you know, if there's a different way of asking that seems a little bit more appropriate, we will often do that. But what we're looking for is where their responses aren't really a small set of limited answers that they can give us. You know, we may ask them to tell us about a time when, give us an example of, and so that's very, very open. And where we are essentially asking somebody to tell us a story about something that's happened in the past. You know, we're looking at transferable skills. So let's say it's might not even have to be in the workplace. It could be when they were at university or college, or they were on their local sports team, whatever it might be. When we get that story that is shared from us, we can then probe further, and we can then find out a little bit more about, okay, well, what did you find challenging about that? You know, that sounds like lots of things went wrong and you weren't perhaps ready for that. So tell us how, you know, how did you find that challenging? What did you do? What happened at the end? And then we are looking at not only their own skills, but we're looking at the way that they communicate that. We're looking at the way that they reacted to something. And the only way we're really going to get that is if we ask open questions. Closed questions are just yes or no answers. And really, we only want to be asking those kind of questions where we've just got a few limited choices. So they're not really best practice for interviews, but we've worked with lots of clients where we've rewritten their interview scripts for them, and they've had too many closed questions in there. They're just not giving us enough detail and evidence about a candidate. It's actually disadvantaging the candidate, because they're not able to really go deeper into what their response and give us more information. And actually, we're just going to end up scoring everybody really poorly, and it's just a waste of time on both ends. So we would always advocate for not using closed questions unless you have just specific yes or no's. So value-based questions. So I think one of the things that we always like to work on with our clients is, you know, do you have a mission statement? Do you have a set of values? If so, when were they put together? Who was involved in putting them together? And are they actually something that's lived with and in your organization? Now, you don't have to have a huge organization to have values. We recently at Nectar HR, I set up a team away day, and you know, ask the team to come up with what our values for 2024 are. You know, we're not we're not a huge team. We're currently 8 members of staff, but the team came together and decided what our values for 2024 are. So now I need to make sure that that now runs throughout our organisation in terms of recruiting, inductions, probations, appraisals, everything else. So think about your values, and essentially we are looking for applicants whose values match our values as an organisation. And so what we can do there is we can ask value-based questions as part of the interview. For example, one of your values may be, you know, we support our residents or our clients or our service users with compassion and empathy. And how are we going to find out if they have that? We're not going to say, are you compassionate? That's a closed question. Yes, I am. Okay, not going to get much from the applicant on that. We want some evidence. So the question would be, potentially, can you give me an example of a time where you helped someone in need? Or can you give me an example of a time where you really went over and above for somebody? What is it about helping others that is important to you? And as a probe in that, you know, they may say something, but then let's get an example. So actually, can you give me an example of when, you know, you've done that in the past? Tell me about, you know, when you've showed a time when you've showed compassion towards a colleague or a customer or something like that. So again, what we're looking at here is specific questions that are really trying to gauge if the candidate's values match our own as an organisation, and we are able to then evidence that and score that on a scoring system because we're being fair. We're asking everyone the same set of questions, and we're being fair in how we are assessing their response. And then competency-based questions. So the competency-based framework is widely used globally, and basically it works on the foundations that we all have transferable skills, behaviour and knowledge, and these are related to lots of different jobs. But what we need to do as interviewers is ask the right set of questions to ensure that we are finding out if these transferable skills exist with the applicants that we are interviewing. So it could be, tell me about a time when, give me an example of, what do you believe XYZ to be, give me an example of that. So what we're trying to do is, a bit like I touched on earlier, we're not presuming that they have to have applied this skill in the workplace. It could be at home, it could be, you know, if we're looking for someone with excellent organisation skills, they may want to talk about how they just planned their own wedding for 200 guests. And, you know, they're really drilling down on what they did and how they made sure beforehand that all the planning was done. That shows us that they've got good organisational skills. It's not in the workplace, but it's a skill set that is transferable. So, you know, let's bring that over into the interview. Like I said, this is widely used. And we'd be looking again at the applicant telling us a story of when they've done something in the past, how that happened and what the result was, and potentially what they learned from it. So you can actually put small probes in your questions as well, just to kind of help you as the interviewer. If you're feeling like you have to tease that information out a little bit too much, you can put some probes in, which looks like you're just asking an add-on question after they've started giving you a bit of information, but not quite enough for you to feel you can score that appropriately, or that there's more that they can give you around this. I just wanted to touch on interview notes as well. Again, you know, we've been supported a lot of our clients with CQC inspections, and, you know, a lot of the time they ask for interview notes. They want to see how we've got to a decision that an applicant is suitable and trained and, you know, meeting a set criteria to join the organisation. But interview notes are also really important if you have a claim of discrimination. So somebody may claim that, you know, you've treated them unfairly because of a protected characteristic. Now, if you follow what I've been talking about in this short session, and you've got a set of objective questions that are all scored the same, you've asked everybody the same set of questions, and you've got your notes to prove it, you can successfully, you know, show that to showcase to to a candidate why you weren't discriminating against them in the outcome, you know, why they didn't perhaps get the role. But, you know, if you needed to, and I have had this scenario once with a client, and we've had to show that actually our whole process at a tribunal, and it was deemed that the applicant in question did not have the correct skills and requirements to meet the job role that we were recruiting for at the time. So make sure you've got your interview notes on there, you know, and you're writing them appropriately. Make sure you've got a script for every single, and by that I just mean, you know, like your introduction, introducing who's on the panel, putting them at ease, the fact that they can ask questions at the end. A big one that CQC would, you know, like to see as interview questions for the housekeeping questions is explain any gaps in employment that you may have. Have you got any? If so, can you explain them to us? And it might just be, oh, in 2018, I've got an 18-month gap because I was on maternity. Great. So we know that when we come to conditionally onboarding this person, if we offer to them, we know that we need to account for that gap with the right kind of reference. There might be a character reference or something to confirm that they actually were on maternity leave. And then if you do go on to offer to the candidate, this then the interview notes then form part of their employment file. If you don't go on to offer, we would recommend that you keep them for a minimum of 6 months before they're destroyed, and that's just in case you get any claims around discrimination. But what we would always say is, and again, it's not on here, but make sure your applicant privacy notice covers how you're using that data. So confirming that you will be holding all information about applicants, unsuccessful applicants, for a minimum of 6 months, at which point they will be destroyed appropriately. So yeah, I would put that in your applicant privacy notice, which comes under GDPR. So that is it from me. Like I said, I'm not sure how we're doing for time, but you can contact us on hello@nectarhr.co.uk if you've got any questions, any short, sharp questions. We're more than happy, me or the team, to come back to you if you just let us know that you were on this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. I think you've given us a real whole food for thought, and I do love the fact that people forget that if you are interviewing someone, always it's good to know, for example, they may be coming from another place, not just we think for the mindset you're coming to work in our environment, but actually understand about them as well. And I think the other side of things is, as we know, is that there is a huge turnover in the sector. And if you've brought someone in from another country and they're meant to be with you for maybe 2 to 3 years, you really want to make sure it's a good fit for your organization, not just for you, but for them as well. There's no point in just bringing people over here for the sake to fill numbers. It's all understanding that, will this person work for your organization? Will they belong in that organization? Will they help morale? What can they bring to your organization? So it's almost as if both parties are sort of selling each other.
Yep.
So it's I wouldn't dare by saying it's a dating website yet, but it's a good match of getting things right.
It is. And actually, I've done speed dating recruitment events for clients in the past. And it's a really strange situation, but, you know, we're there talking about the company, and the applicant is there just telling us about themselves. And then we see who is a match at the end of the night. So it's funny that you compare it to dating, because it is a little bit. But hopefully, you know, everyone on the Zoom call has found that informative, and hopefully given you some pointers and some direction when thinking about interviewing and recruitment in general.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that masterclass, Sonia. And next week we have CQC in talking about international recruitment as well. So thank you very much. Peter, I know we will be sharing the slides, everyone, so don't worry. And it'll be recorded as well, so you have access to it as well as part of our international recruitment series that we're doing. And Peter, before we leave, we've got a few minutes. Is there some bits of information you might want to share as well, by the way, as well?
We've had quite a number of questions about international recruits that are here who have turned up on providers' doorsteps asking for help. It's difficult to know where to refer people. Now, I know that some providers have been able to take them on. been able to change their licenses, that working with 20 hours or whatever. But there is a mix of information available to support people. Most local authority, all local authorities should be able to signpost enquirers to a range of support. Now, technically, these people are not eligible for government funds, but there are still areas where they are eligible under things like the Human Rights Act. And local authorities should act to help them. Some local authorities are being more helpful than others. Now, we've got a number of pieces of advice, which I'm just trying to slot together, and I will add to the website. There's also an area, and we've got the source of this one, and it's about the fees that those bringing people in as international recruits are allowed to charge. And so, again, we'll put that on the website because people have been charged, those that have come in have been charged, in effect, illegal items. They've been charged monies they shouldn't have been charged for. But actually getting anything done about that can be extremely difficult because the money and the actions were not carried out within the UK. They were carried out somewhere else, so they're not within the jurisdiction of UK law. I think the system is looking at some people that have imported recruits to see if there is any way that they can be prosecuted or penalised because they've profited very largely. As I say, we will put that on the website. We keep circulating information. And just back to some very basic points, which Sonia may well have come across as well. We are finding social care providers that don't have basic job descriptions. They don't have up-to-date terms and conditions or employment contracts. Their use of HR process is very poor. They don't, for example, refer their staff to or signpost them to Lcas if they wanted advice. And in many ways, we're dealing with people who have perhaps a poor grasp of English and don't know where to turn to. And it is the duty of employers to provide sources of information and signpost their staff as to where these can be obtained. And that's it from me. Thank you, Dudley.
And just before we go, thanks again. For next, on the 25th of January, we will be with CQC. Actually will be coming in. I don't think they've given many interviews or spoken on this topic much at the moment. So please do share and do sign up. The link is in the chat box as well. Finally, there is some free support and training taking place in North London via PJs for staff in regards to pastoral care and onboarding. You can see the form there. They also will be working in Southwest London as well, so you'll be able to access that as well. So do find that in the chat. We'll also be sharing that information throughout our in the website. And of course, finally, we will be letting you know of the dates for the live sessions. We have two at the present moment. On the 29th of February for North Central London, that'll be taking place in Mornington Crescent, Euston, between Euston and also Camden. And also as well, we have a provisional date for Southwest London in Croydon on the 11th of March as well. We hope to have, it's the 25th, sorry, in the chat box. If you go into the form there, you'll see it there and the time that's on there. And then we'll have the date there. So we'll be trying to get things like the Home Office in as well on some of these virtual meetings and a few other sort of speakers as well. So thank you very much for joining us and do have a good rest of your Friday afternoon, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.